Tales Under a Broken Sky. Good evening, folks, and welcome to episode 22 of Tales Under a Broken Sky. If you listened to episode 21, you might have noticed that this is a little different than the trailer would have led you to believe. I'm still working on that episode, but due to some work commitments and just life in general, I've been a bit delayed in finishing the writing for what was originally intended to be episode 22. It's on the way, just not this week. Instead, I was working on some short social media posts and found what was meant to be a short little series of 1 to 2 minute behind the scenes videos was grabbing more of my attention than anticipated. I realized I wanted to do a full, more in-depth episode instead of those little snippets, so here we are. I've been at this for over a year now, and my workflow skills, process, and the general way I approach the podcast and my writing practice in general have changed immensely. I imagine that over the next 12 months, this is something that will probably happen again. So I wanted to do a little behind the scenes of how I put together an episode, starting with the writing process, then moving through recording, editing, audio production, and then proofing. So that's what this episode will be, a brief and probably meandering look at how I produce the podcast. My process is very iterative, and I frequently find myself backtracking through the different stages as I tidy up and improve things. Whether that might be editing the story itself, changing up the scripting or the backing track, or going in a different direction entirely. So now that that's aside, let's get to it. I do all of my writing, drafting, and scripting in Scrivener, which I will be quite honest about, I only use a fraction of the features. It does have a script writing mode, but with the way I write and record, I haven't found this necessary for my own script yet. As at the end of the day, it's just me. What's not in the script is in my head mostly, and since this is a solo project, I don't need to share this with anyone to get the work done. So I'm going to look specifically at how I structure my podcast episodes here rather than my other writing, because depending on the project, these all look a bit different. So to start off, I have my Tales Under a Broken Sky project. Everything to do with writing, scripting, transcriptions, and brainstorming lives here. I have a couple of folders in here that I use to organize the episodes. The first, complete, speaks for itself. Every episode that I have finished so far lives in here. And by finished, I don't just mean release the episode. It also involves posting the transcript, the prose version for short stories and serial chapters. And once everything has been ticked off, the episode project folder gets moved into this area here. Then we have the in progress folder. This usually contains about 2 to 3 episodes. It's kind of my subtle reminder to myself every day of what I actually need to be thinking about. If I'm sitting down to brainstorm ideas, plots, or I just have a few spare minutes to get a bit of writing done. You can see here that this includes this episode here, as well as the next 2. I color code the different files depending on the stage of completion. Red just means it's not started. It's still most likely a blank page. Yellow, I'm in the process of drafting at the moment, so there are words down on the page. I'm maybe about a quarter of the way through the script for episode 23 at the moment. When I have a full draft done, but I haven't necessarily done any editing on it, I'll change that to orange, but that's generally a very transitory color. Blue indicates a final draft that I'm ready to record, which is why we're here right now. And then green, as we saw in complete, is assigned when I have completed that part of the episode and it's been posted. So this is a quick overview of where I am at any given time. So I know where I need to put my energy when I sit down to write, where I know what I still have left to do for an episode, what I need to do for an upcoming episode. Looking in the progress folder here gives me a quick overview of everything that needs to be done, basically. Then we have the early drafts folder, and this is where everything beyond the next 2 to 3 episodes live. I'm usually planned about 6 to 10 episodes out. I only have 3 in here at the moment. I just haven't updated this in a couple of weeks. I've been a bit busy. But it gives me a long-term view of where I'm going, and also to help remind me of my release cadence as well. I try to do 2 to 3 standalone short stories between every 2 serial episodes. So these files kind of move in and out weekly as they get moved up to the in progress folder and then up into the completed folder. I'll be honest, nearly everything in here is a blank file at the moment. We're working on changing that, but from now I'm kind of writing episode to episode. I've just been quite busy with the actual day job. The last important file here, and I'm not going to click into it because these are all my future ideas, is the future content folder. And this is basically a scratch pad where I type out random ideas as they occur to me. Hooks for new stories, scenes that haven't found the home yet, concepts I want to explore. I try to keep 4 to 5 ideas in here that I kind of try to mull over once or twice a week. Think of these as episodes that are probably 10 plus releases out from the current episode. I haven't necessarily put much thought into them yet, but I revisit the list once a week when I'm bored or looking for something to do and think over what I can do with them. 2 of the projects currently sitting in the in progress and the early drafts folder actually recently graduated from this list. So, when I sit down to write a new episode, I do so basically in the prose file, blank page. That's all it is. I don't have any cues, directions, or effects, or anything noted in here. It just gets written as a story. Writing most episodes, which are generally chapter short story size, somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 words, takes about 2 to 3 days once I sit down to actually get the draft done. I'll then spend another day or so rereading and typing up the story. This used to take me much longer, but I've gotten a better practice now, and writing daily and producing finished stories every 2 weeks for the last year has made me much stronger as a writer in general. I don't do anything fancy with my editing, like tracking changes or leaving comments. Generally, I start working line by line, tightening up prose and atmosphere. Then I examine through the paragraph level, checking for consistency and repeated words. Then I move on to a scene level where I make sure everything kind of flows properly throughout whatever action is occurring at the time. And then I will have a final reread of the whole story just to catch out inconsistencies between the start, the end. With serials, I'll probably also be flipping back to previous installments, checking that I've spelled names consistently and that everything actually matches plot-wise. Once the story's written, it gets assigned the final draft tag, and then I move to actually scripting the episode. We have an episode scripted here. So we can see a bit of scripting here. It's actually for the beginning of the next episode. I copy the prose over into the script file. Then I work through the prose, looking where I can add in backing effects, where my trigger points are for background ambience, music, where they fade in and out, etc. These are all indicated in brackets, bolded, and in red font, so they're easily visible when I'm recording. So I don't, accidentally read out a tag that I shouldn't. I also use blue text to indicate changes in a section, for example, like where I want the intro to go, where I want the story, the background, the call to action, the trailer, etc. to go. In these documents, speech is usually indicated by whatever speech marks I'm using. I kind of italicize thoughts to distinguish them from the narration, as these often have a different voice than even the character might be speaking in dialogue as well. I've gotten pretty good at following these. I've used yellow text in earlier episodes to indicate tone changes, but it was a lot of extra work, and I often found I wanted something different when I was recording anyway. So they seem to matter less, and I don't really use them anymore. These conventions also carry over to the transcript, where I keep everything the same, but I add in extra details for backing music and ambience, and simplify some of the sound descriptions that people don't necessarily need to know the specific plugin I reference for an effect or how I wanted to automate the panning. So that's the basics of me writing and scripting an episode. Writing the background discussion at the end is generally pretty easy for me. I usually get the script for that done in 5 to 10 minutes, as it's more conversational and casual, and I don't necessarily need to overthink it or match a tone. The CTA is much the same. I have a set script and just record it with the episode details added in. I have templates for everything stored in the template folder down here. So all my scripts, transcripts and stuff like that, I can just go into them and I have access, so I can just basically cut and paste when I start up a new project file. Now that we're able to record, I open up and I create my project folder in Ableton Live. I picked this up as a trial for some other spoken word stuff I was doing a few years ago, and I've been slowly upgrading this over the last 2 years thanks to discounts and stuff like that. For my microphone, I used a Beyerdynamic M70X Pro for recording, which I absolutely love. It took a little bit of time for me to dial in and get used to my settings for it, but I love using this thing, and I find that it was much more flexible than the USB mic I'd used for the previous few years. I also have a pair of Beyerdynamic DT770 Pro X headphones. Once again, love them. I can pick up much quieter sounds much better when using them than the previous gaming headset I had. And even though that headset was nice, I could not believe the step up that this pair of headphones was. The noise insulation is great, especially when I'm trying to edit and mix an episode with kids running around in the background, and everything is run through a Focusrite Scarlett Solo. which does literally everything I need it to. Typically, I record in one long take, warts and all. When I first started, I used to stop and start when I lost track of where I was or if I made a mistake and needed to reset. Now I just leave long space of silences or strings of curses that I edit out in the final file. I find that stopping and starting broke my concentration, and it was much harder to keep a consistent voice and tone when I was doing that. So my draft audio files are usually about 15 to 20 minutes longer than the final file. But I've gotten much better at cleaning these up, so it's much less work now than all the fiddling I initially had to do with my older workflows. The background and CTA are recorded on separate tracks as well, just to keep things organized, because they have a different voice and tone as well, so it helps just to take a bit of a short break between takes. My next step before editing is to add in some plugins. I use Isotopes VIA to take care of stuff like compression and tone. I'm self-taught and I still have to wrap my head around using actual compressors and EQs, and some of the presets there do exactly that I want. Sometimes it does sound a little digital, so I will find myself turning down the settings and doing a little bit more detailed work in the background to get things just the way I want. But as I've gotten more practice recording, my voice is much more consistent, and I find this is less of an issue as it doesn't crack as much or fluctuate in level. At this point, I will also try to get my audio levels for the narration sorted or close enough to it anyway. I'll use a combination of VIA's boost setting as well as messing around with the gain directly to get the levels where I want them. I like to work with a little bit of dynamic range, especially in tenser, quieter scenes, so it can take a little bit of a while to find the nice medium. Once I have the levels roughed out, I use Reaper's Reagate to cut out as much background noise as I can and reduce the more egregious breaths and mouth sounds. I record in my living room and there's a road directly outside my window, but this plugin does a great job of cutting out about 95% of everything I don't want. I also use Focusrite's fast limiter to reduce peaks in my audio. I just find that works really well and with a lot less fiddling than other limiters I've worked with. Perfect given I'm a one-man team and I've no real experience in the area. It just works for what I want. So kind of once I have this dialed in, I'll pull out the script, go through the recording line by line, cutting out background sounds the noise gate hasn't cut out, removing bad takes, bloopers, and making sure the narrative flows well. This might involve adding or removing gaps between word sentences or paragraphs where needed. This is probably the most time-consuming part and generally takes about 2 to 3 times the length of the recording to do. It used to be much longer. When I started, I used to edit the file before using the plugins, and there was a lot more noise and crap to remove. Since I started doing the cleanup and the audio levels first, I find them much easier to spot errors and fix things up afterwards. At this stage, if there are voices that have some kind of distortion added, like Maria's voice in The Possessed or phone calls, etc., I split these off from the main narrative track and place them in a second track. Run the same cleanup process as the main audio, then apply the effects that I need. I think Maria's demonic voice in The Possessed Part 1 had about 15 different filters or plugins added to it just to get the desired effect that I wanted. One other thing that I do during the recording is that I make a final editing pass of the text. Reading out loud is often recommended for people when they're actually editing their writing, as you can catch some things when they're spoken than when they're simply just running through your head. While I'm recording and then re-listening and editing, I'm constantly making minor changes to words, punctuation, etc. to keep the text version in line with the recording. I didn't do this at the start, and it added hours of extra listening to the workflow. I'm much more efficient at this now and managed to get the transcript out on the same day as opposed to like a week later when I finally found the time. Once I have the narration sorted, I'll move on to adding the sound effects and doing the rest of the production. I'll open up the sound effects track group and work my way through the script, adding in sound effects, background ambiances, etc. Generally, I just do this quickly at first, not placing directly where they want to go, but rather as a lump of sounds. In order, I'm not that chaotic. I'm not listening to the narration at this stage at all. I'm just putting them in order based on what I have them in the script, and I find this works best for me. Then when I go line to line, put everything in place and work on the mixing, I don't have to go searching. I just work through the sounds one by one, move them into their place on the timeline, move on to the next one. I might have several different tracks here, each maybe with slightly different settings. There might be one for echoing sounds, one for muted sounds that are outside or through walls. I'll also have a dedicated track or two for ambient effects like wind, crickets, traffic. that kind of thing that are constantly going on in the background. The most awkward part here is going sound by sound to mix them in and make sure they're at the right level and place in the mix. Can I hear them? Is it dramatic enough? Does it complicate the narration or make it hard to understand? After this, we move on to the background tracks. Beforehand, I usually kind of have a bit of an idea for the tone or ambience I want when I'm going into the story. And if I've had a bit of free time, I might have already looked at these tracks before I even started recording. I'll use a whole bunch of different instruments and plugins here. I love the old version of Spitfire Labs. I haven't tried the new version yet so far. I've dodged the plugin update. I also use Sound Slate's capsule audio instruments and a few other instrument packs I picked up along the way. I'm not a trained musician and I can't play any instruments for the life of me, but some of the pads and instruments available in these are great for someone with no experience like me, just to add in a bit of music, a bit of ambience, without having to find someone to do it for me. Usually these tracks are pretty simple. I find a bit of bass that fits the mood, some sort of ambient pad to add in some texture, then maybe a few drum hits or other sounds, and fiddle around with some reverbs and delays to make things a little bit more fun. Typically, I'll do this in a separate project file, get things like the levels and the mix figured out, then export it as a WAV, drop it into the episode project. For some projects, this is a simple task. For others, like the Possessed or Pretender, I have 3 to 5 different backing tracks or for different settings and atmospheres. Once this is done, I'll move on to the proofing stage. I export the file, do a listen through with the script in hand and a notebook to take down edits. I try to do this in one listen as it keeps me focused on consistency. During this step, I check for any inaccuracies in the audio quality, glitches, missed effects, tracks I might have muted for one reason or another, and then forgotten about, like the intro. I actually uploaded that once without the intro and the outro because I muted the track by accident. I also edit the script and prose documents to reflect any more changes I might have made in the editing phase that I didn't catch in one of the earlier stages. This is actually one of the longest stages next to editing the audio, as between the listen through, noting edits, re-listening to sections, and making changes to the project documents. This probably takes me about 1.5 to 2 times the length of the final audio file to actually finish. So it's during this stage that I also check to make sure that my transitions between the intro and the start of the episode, between the various sections in between, and like the end of the trailer and the outro, they're all correct. They fade in and out at the right time. Kind of makes sense. I'm not cutting out anything I want in there. Then once this is done and I'm happy with everything, I'll check the overall audio levels of the final file. Currently, I use Julian. I can just drop the file in there and have the results back in seconds. Once I'm happy with the audio, there are no peaks or anything like that. The levels are fine for exporting to Spotify. It's time to upload the file and release the episode. This was actually more time consuming than I originally intended. Getting the formatting correct, adding in stuff like timestamps for the different sections of an episode, table of contents for the serials, writing the dreaded episode description takes a little bit of time. I now have templates saved for most of this, so anywhere I have to use HTML for formatting, it's just a matter of copy and pasting the template and filling in the blanks. Usually while I'm waiting for the final file to export and sometimes upload, I prepare the release pages for my website, the episode page, the prose page if necessary, and then the transcript page. Once I hit publish on the episode, all I have to do is activate all of these and I am good to go. I used to do this afterwards before and at different stages, and it just took so much time. I've got a much better workflow for it now. When I first started out with the podcast, I had no idea that half of these steps even existed. I had no idea about audio levels, compression, EQ, peaks, mixing. So I might go overboard on a few things, and I'm still behind on a few things like captions on YouTube. I hate the automated transcriptions they do between my voice, my accent, the background sounds. They can never get anything close to what I'm actually saying. I will eventually get around to this once I manage to get an episode or two ahead of myself and have less last minute running around to do. Although as for how long that will take, I have no idea. It's been a learning experience to say the least, and I'm constantly looking for new ways to streamline the process, but I also enjoy the attention to detail required. And it's extremely satisfying to go from a blank page to a finished episode, knowing that I've completed all the intermediate steps myself. So there's the behind the scenes look at my process, and it might explain why I chose to go fortnightly instead of weekly or more frequently. This stuff just takes time. I don't want to release anything that I'm not 100% happy with myself as a reader. And sometimes it just takes that bit of time to get out of my head and see the flaws and changes that need to be made in the story. So this was a bit of a change up for this week. I've been making progress on the next episode, and I plan to have that and hopefully another one out before the end of the year, which feels really strange to say as I still can't believe it's actually December. I've been looking through my scripts, and over the last 12 months or so, I've produced about a novel's length worth of content for the podcast, actually several, as I'm somewhere between about 200k, 300k words now written for the show, between the scripts themselves, the background discussion, ignoring obviously the places where these are all those words were repeated. That was one hell of a lot of writing. So here's to hoping that I can keep that up in 2025. I already have some very fun content planned for the next couple of months. Until next time. Thank you for listening to episode 22 of Tales Under a Broken Sky. I hope you enjoyed this week's production as much as I enjoyed writing and recording it. If you did enjoy it, please consider subscribing to the podcast on your platform of choice and leaving a rating or even a comment as well. This will really help the show and keep me motivated to produce more content. If you really enjoyed it, you might even consider sharing the podcast on social media or recommending it to your friends. Thank you again for your time. Stay tuned to hear a brief trailer for the next episode. Tales Under a Broken Sky, Episode 22, The Witches of Kildanu, Part 2. Hi, Sarah?
Hi, Maisie.
She trailed off, and that silence disturbed Maisie. There was something in the way her words just faded, as if she was being pulled away. Is everything all right? Her answer came in the silence, which felt awkward, even over the phone. For some reason, she could see her friend opening and closing her mouth, as if she wanted to say something, but couldn't. Her heart sank in her chest.
Maisie. It's Mom.
Maisie's heart sank. She knew that her friend's mother had been missing. She'd even talked to her about it a few times over the previous month. But now the silence, and her difficulty speaking, spoke volumes. Sarah. Her words trailed off. She simply didn't have the words, or the heart to say what her friend couldn't. The line was silent for another 5, then 10, then 30 seconds. She could hear the deep breathing on the other side of the line.
They found Mom's body, Maisie, and...
Maisie's heart sank. She was grateful that her friend would have a chance at closure, a chance to bury and say goodbye to her mother. But Sarah's words extinguished the last hopes that she might be alive, and that pause at the end. Again, Maisie was more unsettled by the silence than her friend's words. I'm so sorry, Sarah. Is there anything? But she was cut off as Sarah interjected.
Maisie, they found her body. And they know who did it. It was my dad.
The world faded around Maisie as she stared blindly out her bedroom window. A flurry of wind stripping russet leaves from the tree outside. There were no words. No possible response to what her friend had just told her. Sarah, I'm coming home.